Everybody, it's Tim and Steve from Phantom History. And how are you doing, Steve?
I'm well, and how are you?
I'm doing great. This is going to be really interesting. Everybody, we were just in St. Augustine, and we met some friends of yours.
Yes, I had the opportunity to talk to Sandra about 2.5 years ago when I did an episode focused on St. Augustine. So I contacted her out of the blue and said, hey, I'm going to be in town. And she and Tommy were nice enough to hang out with us for a little bit.
So we're going to tell you all about that. We have some clips from our visit, and then also they're going to have lots of stories from doing ghost tours and investigations and things.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for being here. Welcome to Phantom History House Calls. All right, so before we get into the St. Augustine stuff, lots of stuff going on at Phantom History. You have a new podcast.
I do. So just dropped this week. I had a great conversation with a friend of ours, Gina Leslie, who is a psychic as well as a paranormal investigator down in Charlotte County, Florida. And she had some amazing stories about the history and hauntings of Punta Gorda, which a lot of people don't know Punta Gorda because it's kind of a fisherman's village that you just kind of pass on your way to Fort Myers. But I actually used to work there years ago when I was in the newspaper business.
Wow.
And it's a lot creepier than I remember. So it was really cool getting her take.
Really? Because I would think you would have been all about the creepy stuff.
You know, I don't think I had matured into my creepiness yet. I was, out of college and was like, I got to make some money. So that's what I was doing.
So it was really cool though. That's a great episode. And everybody, you can find clips from the episode and of course the entire interview with Gina all on our Phantom History YouTube channel.
Yes, which we are encouraging people to visit us there because we are putting all of our videos there. As you know, Meta has changed its rules to where live videos like this will only stick around for about a month before they disappear. So they will live in perpetuity over on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, you need to go over there and hopefully subscribe. And of course, there's another Phantom History podcast coming out soon.
Yeah, so over the holidays, I had a chance to do a lot of interviews, and I finally had a chance to kind of put them together. And I had a really amazing conversation with the woman who owns McIntyre Villa. Her name's Steph. And one of the funniest conversations I've ever had with regards to something haunted. She had some great outtakes, but also it was just a really cool place in Atchison, Kansas, that is very well known in the paranormal world, been on a couple of TV shows. And her take is coming out on that. That'll be out a week from Sunday.
Yeah, so everybody watch for that. So I had a very unusual thing happen today that I have to tell everybody about.
Yes,
so
you mentioned this, and I don't know the
did.
story.
I think I may have had a paranormal encounter at the gym. A ghost encounter, shall we say. So here's the thing, everybody. Here I am. Picture it. It's the free weight area of the gym here at UFIT around the corner. And the free weight area, there's the racks of dumbbells and then are just some benches in the front. And nobody was in the area but me and this one other fellow. Right? So had been doing some curls. So I fixed my bench and I went over and I got the 25s and sat them down at my bench and sat down. I was about to do my next exercise. And from the rack of dumbbells, the 30-pound just jumped off and came rolling toward me.
Really?
Nobody was near it. Just me and this guy. Nobody was near this dumbbell. I've never seen a dumbbell. Like I've seen them be like askew and then fall. Right. This was just as far as I know, just sitting there. And it literally came off and started rolling toward me. And it wasn't just me. Like I looked at the guy and I went and picked it up and put it back on the rack. And he came over and he said, did you see that?
I said,
it wasn't just me. And he said, yes, I saw it. And I said, well, I guess the ghosts of the gym wanted me to go heavier and do 30s instead of 25s. They clearly were giving me that message. So sorry, ghosts of the gym, that I wasn't quite as beastly as I should have been at the gym today. But anyway, I've never seen, like they're on the rack. They're like in there. There's a little lip and they're like solidly. And I don't know how it happened.
That's very cool.
It literally fell off and came rolling toward me.
So you have a ghost trainer now, which I like.
I guess I have a ghost trainer and he wants me to go heavier on my curls. And I guess I should.
So as we always say, you never know what was there before the thing that is there is there. So who knows what was there?
I don't know, but I've never seen a dumbbell jump off and come and roll at a gym.
At you.
It really was coming at me. It really was. And I kind of thought that was weird and started putting it away. And then the guy was like, did that just happen? So it wasn't just me. All right. I had someone to collaborate.
Yes.
Corroborate.
Corroborate.
Anyway, let's move on to St. Augustine.
See,
but that happened today.
You've
that
opened your
today.
world to the spooky.
I really am wondering. I did a lot of it when we went to St. Augustine. We thought a lot about it. We talked about ghosts, but
brought something back with us. It sounds like
the ghosts want me to have the guns. We're working on it, ghosts. I promise.
Exactly.
Okay.
And remember, if you are watching us live, let us know where you're watching from.
Please say hello.
And say hello. And if you have any questions for us or for our guests this evening, we will, of course, relay those to you. And yes, Kelly, you're right. 30 pounds is pretty heavy.
Well, yeah, sure. We'll say that is.
Getting all buff.
Thanks, Kelly. The ghost did not think I was working hard enough at the gym, clearly. Okay. So shall we bring in our guests?
Yes, let's bring on Sandra and Tommy, who are our guests tonight to talk about St. Augustine. How are you two tonight?
We're good. How are you?
We are good and excited to see you both again.
It seems like just a couple days ago that we were.
I know, right?
We saw them, everybody, in St. Augustine just a few days ago.
Yeah, exactly. And they were kind enough to not only meet and say hello, but we took a visit to the Pirate Museum, which was incredibly interesting.
So cool.
And of course, most people, I felt like such a VIP because, most people, you buy your ticket, you go through the thing and you look at all the displays, which was really well done and really in depth, like really detailed.
Really nice.
But we go through with these two who at every corner, Sandra's like, oh, and the ghost of this room. And then she tells a story, which was fantastic.
So Sandra and Tommy, explain again to us, I guess we'll start there maybe,
Absolutely.
Like what your history is with St. Augustine. How long were you guys there? What kind of tours and stuff did you do?
We both did ghost tours. He also did the educational tours, and I worked in the Pirate Museum, and I gave the educational tours at the Pirate Museum. So, yeah, we had a lot of history in St. Augustine. I was there for about a year and a half.
I was there for 2 years.
2 years. And we have a lot of history there.
That's very cool. So Sandra, since we saw you, you have a new do, and it looks great. I love the new hairdo. So Tommy, I was expecting you to maybe color your goatee or something. That didn't happen.
Yeah. We discussed it. It didn't happen.
I told him he needed to shave a mohawk and do it pink.
Oh, wow. If that happens, I definitely want pictures, maybe even video.
Okay.
Absolutely. So I know that you both have this really cool connection to St. Augustine. You both lived there and worked there for a very long time. It is the oldest city in the United States. Everybody knows that it's crazy haunted. But before we dive in, I'm curious, and this is for each of you individually, do you have a specific ghost story or a paranormal experience that stands out to each of you? I mean, I know you have several, but is there anything where you're like, holy cow, this kind of blew me off my seat?
There was a couple things with me. I think Elizabeth was the biggest one. You and I had talked about Elizabeth on the podcast before. But when I started working in St. Augustine, Elizabeth kind of struck me as the one story that I wanted to learn more about. So I actually did a lot of research about Elizabeth. Now, most people that talk about Elizabeth being the daughter of the guy that ran the city gates. And that's the story that's always told in St. Augustine about Elizabeth. Elizabeth was not the daughter. She died of yellow fever, and she was brought to the city gates when she passed away by the family because they couldn't afford to bury her. So she was essentially left at the city gates. And when they took her from the city gates, they buried her in the Huguenot cemetery. Now, my story with Elizabeth is every time I go to St. Augustine, or when I was working in St. Augustine, I would take the dowsing rods and talk to Elizabeth, and she would actually answer me yes and no. So Elizabeth was important to me.
And I remember you saying that on our initial conversation 2 years ago, where the dowsing rods would open or close to respond to your questions. And the Huguenot Cemetery, I want to point out, is directly across from the old city gates. And we actually have a quick video from there that we're going to show real quick, and then we're going to talk more about Elizabeth here in a second. This is a video we recorded just this past weekend. The Huguenot Cemetery here in St. Augustine was founded in 1821, right after Spain gave the state of Florida to the United States. And it was founded as a cemetery because the city of St. Augustine needed a place to bury those who were not Catholic. Shortly after the cemetery was founded, a yellow fever epidemic broke out, and today more than 400 bodies are buried here, and some say it even extends further beyond the walls that you see here now. Now, there are several hauntings located here. It's also called like the spirit cemetery because there are so many hauntings that are seen here. And two very popular spirits show up. There's a spirit of a young girl that many say was actually a victim of the yellow fever, whose body was dumped just outside of the city gates behind me. And when nobody stepped forward to claim her body, she was buried here in an unmarked grave. She makes herself seen by walking through the cemetery, usually between midnight and 2 a.m., wearing a white flowing dress, and they expect her to be about the age of 14. But also here is Judge Strictly, who died in the 1800s as well, and he was laid to rest here. However, his grieving family moved north up to Washington, D.C., and left his body behind. Later, when his kids grew up, they decided to exhume him and have him transported north to Washington, D.C., but when the grave diggers were pulling out his body, they left the casket over during lunch break, and somebody stole the judge's golden teeth. While the body did end up getting transported back to Washington, D.C., it's believed that he has stayed here, often spotted wandering through the back part of the Huguenot Cemetery as a dark, cloaked figure, possibly looking for those who stole his teeth. So how did I do? Did I get all that right?
You did get all of that right. You need to be working as a tour guide.
And you look good in that swimming tank, I must admit.
Thank you. My beard looked angry. It was very humid that day. So do you think that Elizabeth is the girl that was dumped? You think the girl that was dumped was Elizabeth, and that's even though that may not be her actual name.
Yes, I think she was the one that was dumped at the city gates. And like I said, they didn't know who she was and nobody claimed her. So therefore, when they buried her in the cemetery, the historians felt really bad. So they actually gave her the name Elizabeth. So that's where the confusion comes between the gatekeeper's daughter and Elizabeth the Jane Doe. And the gatekeeper's daughter was actually 17 when she passed away, and she was buried in the other cemetery in town.
Okay. Well, and speaking of the city gates, I know, Tommy, when we saw you over there this past weekend, you talked about some crazy stuff that happened in like those little alcoves in the city gates. So I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Well, so I found some documents that pretty much explain they hung cages. There's coquina pillars there, and they would put you up in the cage, and essentially you were there until you starved to death. Well, the kicker is there was a hook on that cage just in front of the mouth where the family could come up and put pieces of bread to try to keep you alive, but that just prolonged the suffering.
It makes sense that the medieval torture museum would be St. Augustine. Right out of there.
So this was like how they were disciplining, keeping the peace, sort of this kind of brutal type.
That was a punishment. It was a punishment.
Oh, so you're hanging in a cage from the city gates, the city
in those little
towers.
Yeah, yeah. And and do you think do spirits miss us when we're not around anymore? So, for example, Sandra, for you, since you're not doing the tours anymore, do you think Elizabeth misses you? It's obvious you miss her.
Yeah, I think she does. I think she does, but she also has all the school kids and all the tour guides that actually know her, so that have communicated with her and talked to her, and then all the school kids that come in every week. There's tons of school kids there, so there's something going on all the time. So I'm assuming that she is more interactive with the kids than she is anybody else. But I also see her playing with the adults, and I've had people actually ask me who was the child actor at the city gate. Well, I can assure you there's no child actors in St. Augustine.
Wow. Wow.
Isn't that creepy?
That is very cool. By the way, just that Sue, who's watching, says she's going next week to St. Augustine. How exciting. So you're going to love it. Now you'll have all these stories ready to go.
Exactly.
Hello, Cindy, watching from Illinois. Thanks so much for tuning in. And speaking of spirit children, I don't have the video edited together of this one yet, but there is a story of a child haunting the other cemetery as well in St. Augustine.
J.P. Morgan.
And I'm blanking on the child's name, but I'm hoping you can share that
J.P.
story.
Morgan.
So tell us about this.
Oh, J.P. Morgan. So the way the story goes is he liked climbing the trees out in that cemetery. Now, he was on a large oak by the gate where the Talamato entrance is, and he happened to fall off a branch. Well, when he hit the ground, he broke his neck. There's actually a tombstone out there. It's about 5 feet from the wall on the left side of the cemetery, and that's his tombstone. And his mom wanted to bury him where he died, and that's where she got her wish.
And if I remember right, the tombstone's like all by itself because
it's out there by himself. His family, from the research that we've done, his family is actually all of his family. His mom, his dad, and 6 brothers and sisters are actually buried in Texas. Now they moved to Texas after he passed away, but she had originally purchased all those plots right there in the front where he was buried. But when the cemetery closed in 1827 or something like that, they actually were no longer allowed to be buried in the cemetery. So she basically lost all those plots. And James is still there.
And I know that there's reports often of, children seeing him in the tree. And I've also read reports of women especially saying that they'll feel like something is hugging their legs.
I've heard that quite a few times. I've had him, I was actually following a tour. It was your tour, I think. I was following a tour and I had the ghost box on, and we were standing there, and for some reason, the story of James got skipped. And on the ghost box, it actually popped up, "Want to play?" And I was like, what? But yeah, he's been definitely seen doing things like that. He's tugged on my skirt. Elizabeth's tugged on my skirt. I've had quite a few of them try to get my attention.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah. And of course, you always, we've seen the photos of both of you dressed up as really amazing pirates. Look, you guys both carry off so well.
Yeah,
so,
it's really cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is there another one of these?
I was going to show the picture, maybe. You two have shared some of your experiences with us, and while we were there in St. Augustine. And I think, Tommy, you took this picture of what looks like a misty figure in front of a car on one of the streets in St. Augustine. I'm going to have Tim bring it up here in a minute.
You want to see it now?
Yeah. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what we're looking at here.
It appears to me to be a full body apparition. Because if you can zoom into the head, you can actually see the facial structures on that. Now, I've gone back and tried to recreate this picture, and I have no luck doing that.
So yeah, you can see as we zoom in, it looks kind of like, you can see the head and you can see the torso and almost see some face stuff going on. That is, what time of day was this, and what were you trying to take a picture of?
It was late evening, and it was just the street, because all the streets are lined with brick down there.
Mm-hmm.
So I like architecture, and just took pictures of that direction, and it just happened to turn out like that.
That is a chilling image.
It is. And as they say, every corner, actually every square foot of St. Augustine is haunted, it feels like, because everywhere you stop, you just kind of have that feel and that vibe. And to be able to capture something like that is amazing. And not a lot of people, even though there's a lot of hauntings, not everybody is able to capture something like that. So what was your reaction, Tommy, when you saw that picture? Were you excited, freaked out, scared?
Oh, I get pretty excited over that stuff.
With good reason. I would be the same way. What was your take on all this in St. Augustine?
What do you mean?
Like, as the non-spooky part of this, what was your
Well,
take on all this
I
stuff?
think that anytime you're in a place that has so much history, you know, it's you can just feel the years and years and years of history, and it's so easy to imagine walking down that street in a long time ago. I just think everybody loves that experience.
Yeah.
And the idea that there would be ghosts and paranormal things connected seems almost like to me, like of course, like how could there be so much history in a place? Sort of like over in Europe or something, like, you know, these buildings have been here for so long. How could there not be interesting stories or things that have happened?
Yeah. I
agree. I just love that part of it. You know, I'm not as into all the spooky stuff, but well, you know,
that's the one thing I absolutely love about St. Augustine is the fact is there is so much history there, but the tour guides and everybody that works there actually puts in a lot of heart, a lot of energy, a lot of time, and a lot of money in making that history come alive. And that's the one thing that I absolutely love about St. Augustine.
I agree with that, because it feels like the city is alive with all of this history, and it fully embraces it. And almost every place embraces its hauntings too. And that brings us to the St. Francis Inn, which of course is the oldest continually operating inn in St. Augustine, which is not right in the heart of St. Augustine, like on that main George. It is on St. George Street, but not in that main strip. And we walked down there and did a quick video. So we're going to show that, and then we're going to talk a little bit about Lily. Welcome to St. Francis Inn, the most haunted inn in St. Augustine, Florida. This building was built in 1791 and is the oldest inn in the entire city, and as I said, probably the most haunted. Guests have awakened in the middle of the night only to find themselves trapped underneath their own bed. Full-bodied apparitions, both male and female, have been seen throughout the building, and back here on the back steps, there has also been reports of a ghost hand that has been spotted on the railing. These are just a few of the strange paranormal phenomena that has happened here, and it could all be dated back to one woman named Lily who worked here when in the middle of the 19th century. This Black woman from Barbados was enslaved, but she fell in love with the manager's nephew of the inn, and when the manager found out about their affair, he forbade them from seeing each other, and in his depression, the young man leapt to his death from one of the third floor windows, which happened to be Lily's room. It's said today that he and Lily both haunt that room, and it is the most haunted room in this building. Guests have talked about the TV turning itself on and on, radio stations coming in and out, and the water turning on and off as well. It's believed by many psychics who have stayed here that Lily and her young lover actually are both trapped here, but may not be connected, which is why they're so restless. Fortunately, most of the hauntings have been described as mischievous, if not friendly, and nothing malevolent is here. So if you're brave enough and you come to St. Augustine, Florida, and want to stay in a haunted inn, St. Francis Inn is the place for you. So next time we go back, would you stay there?
It's beautiful. That walk down past all these beautiful mansions was unbelievable on that street. So I loved that walk, and that is a beautiful place. I don't know if I want to stay in a place that I know is, you know, water's going to be turning on and off. The trapped under your own bed part, that's...
Oh, come on.
Come on what? Like I should want that, or like I should not believe it?
No, I think you should. I think you should go and stay there.
That's terrifying. I have enough trouble getting out of the covers as it is.
Now, of course, we did not go inside the St. Francis Inn, but I'm curious if either of you have ever been inside that building.
I have not. Been inside St. Francis Inn. I want to, but I had never gotten a chance to. We talked about doing an investigation there, but it just never came together. I did do an investigation at Ann O'Malley's on the second floor, and that is also bed and breakfast, and that place is extremely haunted too. So
So I'm not as familiar with that one. What is haunting that location, and what is one of the stories there? If you happen to know?
Um, the owner there, Kelly, actually told me that she had an autistic child downstairs that was in the restaurant part, and she said he kept telling her that there was a mean soldier standing in the doorway. And she had heard things. She had heard her name being called in the restaurant when nobody was there. And she asked us to come in and do an investigation. I did an investigation in there, and we actually did get evidence of a soldier. I got some pretty weird photos. I think I showed you those there. If I was taking pictures of the front of the building, and the picture kind of morphed, and it was like streaked in yellow, and there was no yellow in the first picture, so it was like really weird. So but we assume, because that spot right there is right across from the Huguenot, and it used to be the Civil War barracks was right there, so it would make sense to have a soldier that was angry.
Well, and you
In
talk
that
about something in the air. You sent us a picture
Yeah.
with a streak in the air. I'm going to share that just to tell us what this is.
So that was one of my customers I had given the ghost tour to. And this was fairly early in the tour. Well, no one saw it, but after the tour finished at the end of the night, he pulled his phone out and showed me this. He was like, "What is this?" Now, I asked a bunch of people, and we haven't proved definitively what it is, but it looks like a helix of some sorts, or an energy ribbon is one of the terms that was thrown around. But yeah, that was wild. Right at the end of the tour.
We've
And
seen energy ribbons a lot in St. Augustine. We really have.
I don't know that term. What's an energy ribbon?
It looks like a ribbon, and it's just energy coming out of the atmosphere, and it's manifesting is what it's trying to manifest. But it ends up just being a ribbon instead of being a
And when you say
full-blown
you see
apparatus.
them, do you see them in person, or do you only see
No,
them on photographs?
on photographs.
Right. But you see them
Yeah.
a lot in photographs, then you mean?
Yeah, yeah, and I actually have a few that I think I've sent Steve a few. There was one in the Huguenot, but instead of going straight across the sky, it was coming up from the ground, and it was kind of curling back and forth.
Wow.
And we've seen a lot of those
Yeah,
in
there was
photographs.
one over the Casa de San Marcos. There was a picture of that floating around for a little while.
Yeah, there's been several over the fort, and nobody seems to know what they are.
Wow.
Well,
We've
it's
looked
funny.
at
I went to St. Augustine, 10, 15 years ago now. And I caught an energy ribbon as well. I think it was the Huguenot Cemetery, but it's shooting straight out of the ground. And
Yeah.
if you're watching and you go to the podcast page on phantomhistory.com on the St. Augustine podcast, you can actually see a picture of this thing. And I remember showing it to the tour guide, and he was like, "I can't believe you caught that." And he was very excited, and I had no idea what it was. I had never seen anything like that before. And I think I caught it in two separate photos. And it looks like it's just like shooting right out of one of the gravestones, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's really weird. I've seen so many like that. I've seen a lot of orbs in photographs. Orbs we kind of discount a lot of times because they could be so many different things. They could be actually water droplets from the humidity in the air. They could be a spot on the camera. It could be a reflection. So orbs we kind of discount a lot. We still see them, and people get excited about them. But when you see an energy ribbon or a full apparition, it's kind of like, oh my God.
Yeah. Wow.
You know?
Well, and you were talking about a angry soldier or a mean soldier that the child was talking about. Another one of the pictures that the two of you sent me over the weekend was from the fort. And the Castillo de San Marcos.
San Marcos, yep.
Which of course dates back to Spanish times, 1600s, 1500s probably, and has all this great cool legends and lore to it. But In this photo that you two shared, if you zoom way in to the left side of the picture, if you scoot that
I don't know
over,
if I can do that. I don't
there,
know if I can go left. I'm sorry. I have another picture that's closer up.
yeah. So this is from, if I understand correctly, this is like from St. Augustine proper, where you're looking out across the street over to the fort. And then
Yeah, from standing in the field right at the bottom of the hill, right by the road,
right.
is where that picture was taken. Yes.
And then you were kind enough to send us a zoomed in version of the picture.
Yeah.
And there it is right there. You can see what looks like a soldier, I guess. What are we looking
Yeah,
at?
that's what it looked like to me. Was the Spanish soldier actually? And if you look closely, you can actually see the white pants and the red top. So that's what it looked like to me. And I know when we were giving those ghost tours, there was nobody out there. So when the guest actually showed us this photo, I was kind of like, "Oh my word, this is this is crazy. What have I got myself into?"
Yeah, that is pretty intense.
It is. And,
Yeah,
and
that's what.
I can't remember which one of you told us the story, but that you said that field was where a lot of people were just kind of left after they were slaughtered during battle.
Yeah, because they used the back side of that is like a walkway, and it's called a covered way, and it's not covered, it's open, but it's called a covered way because you can't see it from the road. So when you're down on the road and you look up, you can't see that walkway back there, and you can't see the moat. So the soldiers would actually hide behind that wall. So when the enemy come running up the hill, they would just stand up and pick them off one at a time, and they just left them where they were. That way, they could deter people from coming up there or the enemy from coming up, because all these bodies are laying all over the ground out there. So those bodies are still there.
Well, and part of our conversation this weekend was about, how anytime you do any kind of improvements or construction, you have to have an archaeologist with you because you're going to find something.
Yeah,
in St. Augustine.
In St. Augustine.
If you're doing digging and building in St. Augustine, I can't even imagine. Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
they have to have an archaeologist come out and do a whole investigation before you can do anything in St. Augustine.
Well, I mean, we talked, at the beginning of our conversation about being at the Pirate Museum, and one of my favorite, well, geez, there's so many favorite stories, but the story you shared about how they did construction, had to replace a floor, found a well, found some pottery, and then you figured out you found somebody that was connected to that piece of pottery. I was wondering if you could tell me that story again. We don't have that picture.
Yeah, the well itself was underneath the floor in the Pirate Museum. They had some water damage from flooding, and they had to replace all the floors. Well, when you pull up the floor, there's nothing underneath of it. It's a dirt floor underneath of it. So when they pulled up the floor, they found the well. Now, from the research that I've done about the Pirate Museum, the building itself was actually a house, and it was on St. George Street. But when they built the fort, they actually moved it from St. George Street back to where the Pirate Museum is today. Now, when I was in there and we were investigating in the Pirate Museum, we actually did a dowsing rod session in the Pirate Museum, and there was a little boy that was talking to me, and he was a little boy. He was 8 years old. He was from the 1800s, and a piece of pottery that they actually found underneath the floor was put in a case in the Pirate Museum just as you walk into the computer room right there. And it's in the glass case, and he actually took me to that piece of pottery. I asked him, I said, "Is there anything in here that belongs to you?" And the dowsing rods turned right to the pottery. And I went over there, and I kneeled down, and I got close to the case, and I tried to get the dowsing rods to go to which piece. And that was the little piece of blue pottery that he said that was in his house.
Wow.
And that's incredible, one, that you're able to get that much information.
Yeah.
And I hear so often, especially from women, that children, the spirits of children, communicate with women really more regularly than men. Is that a fair assumption?
I think so too. And I think the other thing too is that people have to remember is that when you're using tools for ghost hunting, you have to use something that they're going to feel comfortable with. Now, dowsing rods have been around for a long time. So people know what dowsing rods are, but you start using stuff with lights and buttons and everything else, and sometimes it scares them. It scares them to the point where they don't want to communicate. So a lot of my investigations, I actually use dowsing rods because it seems like the older the apparition, as far as timeline, not age, but timeline, it's easier to communicate with something that they're familiar with.
I think that's very fair. They're not going to know what all this thing that's beeping and booping and making all this
Yeah,
noise is or lighting up. They're going to recognize that.
yeah,
I want to share one more video before we start wrapping up. Again, St. Augustine. There's history everywhere you step, and we stopped somewhere for a drink our first day there at a place that I knew was haunted and had a history. It's called the Casablanca Inn, and it is one of my favorite places, not only because it's beautiful, especially around Christmas time when they have all the lights and stuff on it.
yeah.
But I love the story about this woman who is involved with prohibition. Check it out. The Casablanca Inn on the bay here in St. Augustine, Florida, is one of the many haunted locations here, and it's said that many people who pass by will report seeing a woman in that balcony or in the window on the second floor waving what looks like a lantern. It's believed that that's connected to one of the former owners here who got in bed with some bootleggers in the 1920s during the Prohibition era and would let the rum runners know when they had the all clear in order to bring their bootlegged booze onto the shore and to filter into the city of St. Augustine. She actually made more money doing that by working with the bootleggers than she did than running this inn, which was built for traveling salesmen and for some families. So that woman is likely still here in this building, letting people know, or letting the bootleggers know, that they have the all clear to come on shore. But she's not alone here either. This was also a home to some children, and it's said that people inside will hear footsteps of what sounds like children on some of the wooden floors, also on the second story. And diners here at the Casablanca Inn will also share that they will see a misty figure of a woman going through some walls on the second story, as well as drifting up and down the steps. Maybe that woman who helped out in Prohibition never actually left. I love that place.
Yeah, we had a drink there, and it was really nice.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I'm assuming that that's probably a hot spot on ghost tours as well, to stop in front of the
Actually,
Casablanca.
it's not. They don't really talk about that a whole lot on the ghost tours.
Oh,
They
spilling
tend
their
to
stuff.
stay. They tend to stay on the north end of the city, which where it's with the cemeteries and the fort and all that. The city gates. They tend to stay on the north side. There is a couple companies, I think, that are now trying to do ghost tours on the south side of the city, but there's not a lot of ghost stories that are told about the south side.
I'm breaking some new ground. I like it.
I told you should be a tour guide.
Time to move over there. That's it. Well, and you did notice during that video that one of those trolleys drove past me. They do some amazing history tours throughout the day. There's also trolleys that do tours at night. So if you don't want to walk all these things, there's different options for you as well, which again is part of the charm, I think, of St. Augustine.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. We had a really good time. We loved seeing you guys, and thank you for the tour of the Pirate Museum, which was very cool. Pirate and Treasure Museum. So anybody, if you're going to St. Augustine, don't miss that as one of your stops, because I thought it was really, really great.
Yeah, I did too. And that leads me, I guess, to my final question for the two of you. Each of you individually, you may have the same answer. But if somebody is visiting St. Augustine and has limited time, what is the one site that you would say that they have to go see? What is the must-see spot in St. Augustine? It's a hard question because there's so many cool spots.
Yeah, it's a really hard question. I mean, to me, it's the Pirate Museum, but pirates are in my heart. I love pirates. So, but I don't know. I mean, the fort's a big one. Yeah. I think that's that's one of the big ones too, that somebody should, if you can only do one or two things, I think between the fort and the pirate museum, you've got most of St. Augustine.
And the lighthouse. Lighthouse is also really good stuff.
But the lighthouse is over in Anastasia, so yeah.
But that lighthouse is really special and really
It is.
beautiful. So it might be worth the trip too. I get that.
Yeah, and even if you're not into the spooky, but you like history, it's the place to be too. I mean, we toured the fort one afternoon as well. Saw every corner of it, including the powder room where supposedly some young lovers were found, which we'll talk more about on our YouTube channel. So I want to remind everybody that every video that you see tonight and more are going to be on our YouTube channel, so you can check them out and learn more about these locations for yourself. And as we continue to do our travels all over the place, we're going to keep doing this, which is fun. And the cameraman is fantastic.
Do what I can. So thank you guys for spending time with us tonight and for sharing some of your stories. We're going to probably have you back sometime to do a little more reporting with us, we hope. But we've had such a great time meeting you. And thank you again for taking time to say hello to us when we were there.
No problem.
No problem.
All right. Thank you
Awesome.
both. We will see you again next time we're back over there, and we'll stay in touch. And thank you, everybody, for watching. And if you get over to St. Augustine, shoot us a message and let us know what your experience is like and if you have any spooky encounters.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.